Cyborg Assassin, Chapter 1, 12. Oshun surveyed the forest 10,000 feet below her classroom. She'd prefer to be sitting under the tree amongst the flowers of spring. Instead, she had to listen to an android supply teacher reciting the dates of Planet's major scientific breakthroughs. It wouldn't be so bad if he took more time to discuss the scientists and their inventions, but the pale-skinned and black-haired android skipped past those details as he marched down the centre of the class, clicking his fingers with every date, name and location. Pat Costa was a much more fun teacher, but she was having a baby, so Tark had filled in for 6 months. Click. Sir Edward, Year 1062, Mayleeda. The first manual suspension vehicle. Click. Chazrol, Year 1181, Old Belu. The first Belu glass. Tark stopped and turned his head before an arch unzipped in the classroom partitioning. A message android took 2 steps into the class and glared at Oshun. Oshun Musa, must go home now. Oshun held her breath, then wiped clammy hands on her skirt. The time hadn't come, had it? She'd been dreading this day since she was little. I will escort you home, the blonde android said. Children cannot leave the facilities unattended. Oshun swallowed, slipped her airsphere remote into her skirt pocket and stood. Once outside the class, she ran down the corridor to keep up with the marching woman. Can't Peter pick me up? Your home helper is busy attending to business. Since when was Peter busy with anything but Oshun and Mum? Perhaps it had happened, and she'd lose him too. They left the transparent school and entered a pedestrian tunnel. It ran under a maglev suction tube to reach the edge of a crystal pathway. The transparent tunnels and trails mostly deserted. The maglev station was empty too. After 3 suction tubes, they stepped into a hover disc which followed a pathway down to a crystal parking lot in Cracker Forest. Oshun's dreams of sitting under one of those trees carefree melted away. The silent android watched Oshun unlock her hover scooter and program its destination. Satisfied, she turned on her heel. Goodbye, Oshun Musa. As Oshun levitated over a narrow crystal pathway, the delicate flowers of spring seemed to bow with sympathy, and the birds quietened their singing. Her knees weakened as images of loneliness flashed through her mind. No longer could she feel bright. Oshun approached the front gate of her home and got off her hover. She let the scanner check her iris, face and handprints. When the gate opened, she shuffled into the herb garden. The sweet fragrances only made her head ache more with the fear of what she'd soon discover, and the yellow trumpet flowers blinded her with their bright shades. A human woman opened the door of Oshun's home. The woman had cropped hair the colour of straw. Oshun knew she was a human because sympathy etched her freckled face. Heartbeat racing, Oshun's voice came out shrill. Is Mum dead? The stranger moved closer and offered a deep sigh. She is, but Oshun pushed past her. Let me see. The woman stepped to the side without complaint as Oshun hurried through the hallway and down the stairs. Her heart thumped wildly in her chest like a bird trapped in a cage. She pushed open the door to Mum's bedroom. For the first time in 7 years, the buzzing of Mum's life support machine didn't ring in the air. Time slowed down as she stared at Mum's sleeping face, but she wasn't asleep. Her body no longer moved from the air pump. Oshun took light steps towards her. Mum's coffee-coloured skin had turned 3 shades lighter, as if someone had added milk. At least her eyes were closed. She wouldn't see Oshun's pain. She lifted Mum's stiff hand and squeezed it. Tears wouldn't escape. She'd been preparing for this day since the age of 5 when the virus took Mum away. It had eaten into Mum's brain and changed her into an empty shell. The stranger's voice broke the silence. I need to talk to you, Oshun. Now that you have no parental guardians, I give you 2 options. A shiver travelled up her spine as she turned towards the woman. Only now did she notice her military attire, a green blazer with badges, matching trousers and clunky boots. What are they? Go into foster care while social workers look for a suitable couple to adopt you, or join a military school with other children your age who are in a similar circumstance. A school? Yes, a military school. Oshun turned to gaze at Mum's face. She stroked one of Mum's cornrows with a fingertip. Mum's android nurse had only braided it 3 days ago. What do children do in military school? Learn to fight. She flinched. I don't want to kill. I want people to live. I hate violence. I want Mum to live. If you accept to join other children, we can resurrect your mother. She fumbled with the edge of Mum's blanket as her pulse picked up. What do you mean? Bring her back to life. She unlocked her hands together to force them into stillness. But that's magic. Magic isn't real. The word magic simply means a type of science which humans do not yet understand. Science is magic. How can you bring her back to life? I promise nothing, but there is innovative technology on the horizon which gives the potential to bring back the dead. Oshun's 12-year-old mind didn't quite understand what innovative meant. Can you say that in child language? Have you heard of a clone before? A copy of something organic? Yes, in this case, a copy of a person. You can make a copy of my mum? Not I. A team of scientists may do so. But copies aren't the same as the real thing. They are, if we have a copy of her memory chip too. Oshun shook her head. Mum didn't have one of those. She did. She does. After she got ill from the Cetas virus, doctors copied her memory chip in the hope they could reverse amnesia, but her brain had already suffered too much damage. Is that why she never remembered me? The woman nodded, her breath temporarily bottled in her chest as she quivered. Is that what you said to the other children? Yes. That didn't sound surprising. What child would ever want to be a soldier? Who must I kill? I said nothing about killing. The corner of the woman's mouth twitched and her eyes appeared turquoise as she glanced up at a small and circular skylight which tunnelled sunshine into the depths of the earth-sheltered home. I only ever wanted to be peaceful. Wouldn't you do it for your mum? She looked at her shoes. Of course I would. Do you agree to join the military school then? Yes. Mum's death made Oshun's stomach feel strange. Although Peter insisted she eat, she couldn't get the food down her throat. Oshun, you must eat. I'm not hungry. But if you're to become a little cadet, you will need food for your muscles. I said I'm not hungry. She lifted the plate, took it to the compost hatch, then scraped off her leftovers and pressed the plate and cutlery into the Bilu glass countertop. It melted into the unit. I'm going to pack. There's no need. I've already done it for you. She brought a shaky hand to her forehead. What else could she do? She needed to take Mum's death off her mind. Although Mum had lacked the energy to speak to her for the last 7 years, it didn't mean Oshun didn't love her, didn't miss her. Her hands felt empty as her heart. I have something to do. You don't need to do your homework. What can I do, Peter? You can relax. How can I relax? Her voice quavered. Mum's dead, and I'll never see you again. You won't need my help anymore. Don't worry, Oshun. I'm not worried. Her chest curled inwards. I understand you feel sad. I do not have emotions since I am a robot. However, I can offer you my sympathy in other ways. He quirked an eyebrow. Would you like to play air chess? A sharp pain stabbed her heart. I guess I could try. Oshun felt empty as she stepped out of the hover disc with the blonde woman, Pax Sylvester, who had told her about Mum. Inside the large underground room, other hovers sat in a line. A faint buzz of a maglev travelling through a suction tube unsettled the air. Is there a suction tube station close to here? The military owns maglev suction tubes which travel to skyports. There's a terminal in these underground facilities. Oshun looked at her small bag and followed when Sylvester tugged at her arm. Shouting and laughter rang out from the end of the passageway, followed by crashes and bangs. Excuse the noise. Many children are new like you, and their commander doesn't seem interested in disciplining them. Oshun froze to the spot after entering the dormitory full of 20 other kids. Some hadn't noticed her arrive. A little boy who must have only been 8 climbed his bunk bed and leapt off, landing onto heaps of cushions. Oshun stared at the source of the bangs. A boy her age, he bashed a stick against the metal poles of his bunk bed. "Will you be quiet?" Sylvester shouted. A couple of girls looked at her before giggling and continuing to talk. Everyone else ignored her. Oshun's eyes widened at the continuous chaos, then glanced at Sylvester, whose face became pink. "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" Oshun called. The noise stopped, and everyone looked at her. When she peered up at Sylvester, the woman was pulling a long face and nodding at her. "Well said." She narrowed her eyes and scanned the room. "So, you'll take orders from a 12-year-old and not from an adult? No wonder you all became parentless." "That's not fair," said an overweight Papsnan boy, screwing up his fists. "It wasn't my fault Mum and Dad died. It was that terrorist who did it, not me." "But they went to the concert without you, didn't they?" "So?" "They needed to get away from you. You're all juvenile delinquents and worthless." Oshun drew in a slow and steady breath as her muscles quivered. "There's your bunk." Sylvester pointed at a bed at the bottom, then turned around and left. Oshun sat down and stared at the rough grey blanket. "She's such a bitch," hissed a girl on the other side. "Are you friends with her?" the angry peach-skinned boy asked, still balling his hands. "No." The boy who'd been jumping from the top bunk marched towards her. He put his hands on his hips. "Then why'd you shout? Shut up, shut up, shut up!" Oshun pointed at the oldest kid with red hair. "Because he was bashing the bed with a stick and wouldn't stop." The boy started bashing it again. "Like this?" Her neck stiffened. "Yes." He continued to do it. A couple of girls closest to him along the line of bunks stuck their fingers into their ears and screwed up their faces. "Stop it!" Oshun yelled. He smirked and continued. Pulse speeding, she clambered off her bed and paced towards him. "I said stop it!" He gazed down his nose at her and sneered, then whacked it again. Clang! With heat flushing through her body, she hooked a foot under his ankle and kicked. He tripped over. This time his head smacked against the metal bed frame instead. Everyone laughed as Oshun turned around and walked towards her bed. She slumped on the itchy blanket, reflecting on how she just needed peace and rest. "What's wrong with him?" a little boy said in a squeaky voice. "He's not moving." "She killed him," a girl on the end of the dormitory said. "Press the emergency button." Oshun's body movements froze momentarily. She covered her mouth with a shaky palm. Had she killed him? Chapter 2. Xing. Xing stirred a large pot of curry in a community kitchen in Hidden City. He lifted the wooden spoon to his lips and tasted. Too sweet. He added salt and tasted again, then nodded. "Spoon some up for your family and go." The overweight chef nudged him to the side and tasted the curry. "Good, very good." "Can I go now?" "Do you not want to see the eclipse?" "I do." "Eat up quickly and go. There'll be queues in the caves for the boats." Chef reached for 4 large bowls and turned to spoon steamed roots and nuts in. Then he returned to the pot and scooped the curry over the top. He elbowed Xing. "I'll help you carry them. What level are your folks and sister on?" Xing shrugged as they left the kitchen. He walked past fruit trees towards the bar at the balcony's edge, which overlooked the Shard. Balconies peered over the hexagonal hole 100 metres across. Trees bathed in infrared grew on different levels where people socialised within gardens, forests and farms. He swiped a button. "Mum, where are you guys?" "Waiting on -5, north side. Are you coming?" "Yeah, Chef's helping me carry the food." "Brilliant." Chef raised a thin brow over his vast and completely black Beluvian eye. "North side -5. Xing nodded and led the way to the closest glass elevator. It took them up 5 levels where the temperature decreased for cabbage crops and apple trees. They followed a path around to the north side of the Shard's hexagon. Mum, Brian and Isa wore black fur coats and sat cross-legged on the floor around a small table. Compared to Xing's stepdad and stepsister, Mum looked like a shadow with her coal-black skin. As he approached, their gigantic eyes turned in his direction and glinted against the infrared. Isa rubbed her hands together. "I'm starving." It's spicy, Zing warned as he and Chef placed the steaming bowls on the table. He sat with them and accepted a black fur coat from Mum. It'll be cold up there, she said. Even colder than Cabbage Plain. They all laughed.
It might be spring, Brian said, but don't forget we're in the north, not the south.
Chef retrieved 4 steel spoons from the pouch in his apron and muttered an ancient Arthian saying about enjoying the meal.
Fardum Migmog.
Thank you, Brian said. But won't you be joining us to see the eclipse? No. I have no interest in the heavens or the sky. Here is my home, under the depths of Vorta, away from that crazy president up there.
After Chef left, they dug in. I think I'm getting used to spicy things. Isa rubbed her thin red lips with the back of her chalk white hand.
You're growing up. Brian smoothed her albino hair. You'll be 12 in another moontide.
Although Zing was big for his age, Isa was only 2 years younger. In the 5 years Mum and Brian had become an item, she had become one of his best friends. Are you excited about the eclipse, pretty girl? Mum asked her. She smiled and nodded, but then her face went slack. Will it be safe up there? From the communists? Isa nodded. They don't come to the north coast anymore, Mum said. A small frown dented Brian's brow as he searched Isa's face.
There'll be scouts going ahead of us too.
Quickly, eat so we can get a place at the front of the line, Mum said. We're lucky Zing works in the kitchens and that Ed was kind enough to let him off early.
Good thinking. Brian shoveled the vegan curry into his mouth and made a loud smacking noise as he ate.
When they headed through the cave system, Zing smiled to see that few had come yet. They only had to wait a few minutes for a boat beside the underground river. It took them through a tunnel, and from there they followed a Mayleedian usher through caverns and passageways to the cave which faced the beach. The native Arthian woman had paper-white skin and hair like Brian and Isa, but unlike black and white Beluvians, she had small yellow eyes with white around the edge and black pupils in the middle. Will we need light-intensifying goggles? Zing asked her. The natives won't, but you will. She reached into a box shrouded in the shadows inside the cave, and she pulled out specialised goggles for Beluvian eyes. They strapped them on, and Zing could see much better. Should we look at the eclipse with these too? No. Only solar eclipses are dangerous to look at. The natives designed these light-intensifying goggles especially for Beluvians when Hidden City was first created. It was the least we could do for all the Belu technology your ancestors brought to this planet. Don't worry, Mum said. We have a large button-up pockets inside our coat. The woman smiled and handed them around, then pointed to a row of hoverboards leaning against the rock. For safety measures, we'll watch the eclipse a mile along the coast. A few families are waiting there with their ushers already. Can the kids use hoverboards? We can, Isa said. They unfolded the frames and held the handlebars while stepping onto their surfaces. And then they were away, out of the cave and over the coast, flying through the frigid air of early spring in the northern lands of Vorta. Zing gasped. He'd never been above ground at night before. And instead of the white sand coves glowing red from the red dwarf, they glowed pink from white starlight mixed with the red light of 2 full moons. The moon seemed to stare at them as they levitated over the coast. They looked like 2 red eyes, watching and waiting for the shadow of Arceus to cross over. After flying over 10 different coves, they came to one dotted with campfires. They landed and took off their light-intensifying goggles, then warmed their frozen hands beside one of the many fires. Zing glanced at their usher. She was middle-aged but attractive and slim. He cleared his throat. This is the first time I've seen the twin moons. How old are you? 14. I thought you were 18. He's big for his age, Mum said.
It's because he works in the community kitchens on -4, Brian said. Mum laughed.
Ed makes sure he eats well. The Mayleedian tilted her head and grinned. I know Ed. He's a good friend of my father's. I live on -4 with my family. My parents are just next door to us. Who are your parents? Mum asked. Zovia and Dan. Mum shook her head. I don't think we know them, do we, Brian?
Afraid not.
As they made small talk, Zing relaxed beside the warmth of the fire and noted Isa's excited grin. He tilted his chin back to peer at the stars. Dad had always been a lover of astronomy and promised to take him above ground, but in those days communists patrolled the north coast. By the time they moved their base south of the Marzi Pass, Dad had died of a quick-growing cancer in his blood. He'd died when Zing was only 7. Mum believed Dad was in heaven, but Zing didn't. That didn't stop him pretending to believe her fantasies. She meant the world to him. He stared into the dancing flames and let out a pent-up breath. Did Mum remember Dad like him? The fire soon warmed Zing's toes and feet too. Mum laid a hand on his shoulder and jutted her chin towards the moons. "Change your glasses, folks." Everyone silenced as they donned their eclipse glasses. Okay, that's something I have to edit out of this. As a shadow crept over the moon on the left, someone let out a scream. Others shouted and groups disappeared from around fires. They darted around in panic. Bullets whispered past and more individuals fell, sobbing, screaming, or silent. Mum fell. Coldness hit his core. He fell to his knees, tugging Isa down to the sand. "Mum!" Brian crouched beside her, gripping her hand and hyperventilating. "Honey, thud." A bullet smashed through his skull. An uncontrollable shudder swept through Zing's body as he hugged Mum's bloody chest. "Mum!" He tried to block out Isa's wailing. "Mum!" Mum wheezed in and out. "Look after Isa. Take her. Hide. Come with us." Slipping his hands under Mum's upper back and neck, he tried to pull her closer, gathering her near. "No," she coughed up blood. "I'm dying. Now is your only chance. Take the hovers. You won't die." As his gaze bounced around the beach, all the stargazers lay dead or dying. Children too. "Come too, Mum." "I can't. It's okay. I'm ready to die. Your dad, he's..." A tear rolled down her temple towards her ear. "I'll watch from heaven. Please." Her chest convulsed and she sucked in a breath. "Look after Isa." Her black eyes went glassy. Isa was already sobbing and hugging her dead dad. "We must get out of here." The obscurity lifted away from the twin moons, making Isa's dim grey face turn pink again. "How? If we remain lying down, they'll think we're dead too," she whined. "No, let's take our boards and go. Won't the killers see us if we stand?" "Can't you bodyboard? We can slip the boards under our bellies as we lie in the sand." "No, the handles are too high. I'll fall off." He swiped his tears, regretting not letting her hang out with him and his crazy friends, all the times they had ventured out of the cave in the day to bodyboard on their hovers over the northern sea. Shite. "Let's go after 3, she said. "Okay. 1, 2, 3. They slipped their boards under their feet, nodded, then leapt into the air. As they lifted higher, Isa screamed and fell into the ocean. His chest tightened, eyes bulging. He wanted to go after her, but fighters were already running into the water and taking her body. There was no use. He was unarmed. He should go back and tell everyone in Hidden City. But what if she lived? He had to follow. His coal black skin would be hard for the natives to spot from so far down, even under the 2 full moons' red light. No bullets shot past. As 2 fighters carried Isa up the cliff, she screamed, alive. What would they do? Interrogate her for information? Other paratroopers on the beach yelled at one another as they discovered living amongst the dead. They hauled them up the cliff too. One man got shot in the head after his loud and angry protests. The tightness in Zing's chest wouldn't loosen as his eyes searched for Mum's corpse, but the black and white Boluvians all looked the same from up here. Mum. He wanted to bury her. He had to warn the others, but saving Isa was his right.